I'm Sonia Usatch-Kuhn, and welcome. I am your host on Poets on Poetry. I will be speaking with members of the North Carolina Poetry Society. We will be discussing the myriad components that go into the process of writing a poem. My guest today is Doug Croft, a writer of poetry and essays. His work has appeared in multiple anthologies, literary journals, and old school newspapers. Doug lives in Charlotte, but he travels around the country managing capital fundraising campaigns. His poetry has been described as heartfelt, empathetic, patriotic, pointed, and wonderfully human. He has received 2 awards in regional writing competitions. He has written 5 sketches, which have been performed in various settings. He gets to see live music of as many of his favorite bands as possible. Doug attends theater and cheers for the Panthers and the Hurricanes. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
We're happy to have you here. Tell me about your awards.
Actually, there's a third one because it happened just last week.
Congratulations.
A third award, which was a first place. Some of those were second place or honorable mention, but last week in Thomasville, North Carolina, their community had a poetry contest, and I was the adult winner. And so I was able to share that. So that was one. There was one in Lincoln County several years ago, and I'm part of the Charlotte Writers Club. And
okay. I
had an honorable mention in one of those.
Yeah. Did you bring your winning poem from last week in Thomasville?
I did not.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
It was recorded, so it is out there in public.
Okay. Okay. So poetry. I am guessing that you started writing young because you said that some of your poems were in old school newspapers.
Well,
high school?
No. I actually, the first published poem I had published was in a local newspaper in Thomasville, North Carolina, but it was actually a September 11th related poem. So it was in the early 2000s. I actually started writing poetry about 20 years ago. So I'm in my early 40s, if I have to tell how old I am.
And what exactly prompted you to start writing?
It's kind of a funny story. I was in my early 40s. A beautiful lady and I were in love with each other, and she sent me a love poem. And I thought, I would sure love to be able to do that. And I took a stab at writing one to send back, and it felt good, and I enjoyed it. And I wrote another one the next day, and I wrote another, and I've been writing for 20 years. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
So love poems started you off.
It did.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's sweet. Okay. So that was your first inspiration, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is that why your poems are described as being heartfelt?
Could be. I think I just I write what I feel. So sometimes, that can be personal, but it can have a heart to it. So I hope even a few that I may read tonight, you may feel something out of those.
Okay. So thematically, besides love, what else do you write about?
A lot, just about anything, but I have written quite a bit about nature.
Yeah.
I've written about social cause or social justice, patriotic. When the mood strikes, there's usually a cause that makes me feel that to write that. Some about specific people, a friend or a family member, in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I'm a little curious about the social justice because there's so much going on in the world, and Not all of it is just, not all of
Indeed.
it is just.
Well, actually, this poem that's not in my book actually helps answer that question. Um,
Well, why don't you read
and
it
let's
right
just go ahead and
now?
do that one first, if
Absolutely.
that's all right.
Sure.
It's it'll be in what would be a second book that's kind of in the process, but it's one of my favorites of the more recent poems I've written, and it's entitled On the Street.
Okay.
And it does happen to answer your question. So
Okay.
I want to write of vagabonds, miscreants, and wanderers, poems of troubled souls, but I've never lived on the street. I want to write of lost individuals surviving in concrete campgrounds, sharing leftover food scraps, yet I've never lived on the street. I want to write from perspectives of newspaper blankets, oversized clothes and cardboard shoes, unkempt hair, and hunger. Hunger for anything or hunger for everything. However, I've never lived on the street. I write instead of what I know, nature, love, and broken hearts. I write of social injustice and human condition. I sometimes write of music and light, people I know, and American collective. I write of elderly, Christianity, and silly little verses. I met a lady serving her Lord, ministering to those lost to society, displaced from work, living conditions, or family connection, consumed by ravages of addiction or mental disorders, vulnerable to elements of exposure. She shared her spellbinding poem, depths of brokenness and vagrancies and struggle. So moved, I whispered, I wish I could write a poem like that. Her thoughtfully warm and soft reply, ah, but you cannot, for you have never had to live on the street. So it kind of answers your question and
Yes,
talks about a societal issues.
absolutely. Your desire to try and be in the shoes of somebody who lives on the street, but it's the true life experience of someone who can really express it with the knowledge and pain.
Incorrect. That's correct.
Yeah. But I'm very happy to know that you wrote such a piece
Thank you.
that tells of how it is.
In my imagination
Yeah.
is because I haven't lived it, but
Yeah.
I heard literally that's a true story. I heard her tell that story in a
Ah,
poem, and I literally said, "Wow!" She sat down next to me after I was following her on a reading experience, and she sat down next to me. I said, "Wow, I wish I could write a poem like that," and that was her true
Yeah.
response. So
yeah. That's wonderful to have captured it and honored her.
absolutely.
Okay. So besides writing the truth and social injustice, what other elements do you focus on when you're writing? For instance, does it come through meditation? Does it come through maybe a prompt that you've received at a poetry workshop? Or, okay, do those and I'll follow
Well,
with the
sure.
third portion.
I've done a few through poetry workshops, but usually it is a prompt, meaning not a place prompt, but it's an idea. Or sometimes it's a line, or I hear a few words, or I think
Mm,
a couple of words and go, that sounds like there's a poem in there. And then I've, like I've studied a lot of songwriters who say when they get an idea, they have to stop what they're doing
let's
or they'll
write it
lose
down
it. And
right
so
away.
that typically, if I get a line or a little verse in my head, I don't know if it'll really turn into something, but I stop what I'm doing and get it down.
Yeah,
And it may be the start of something really good, and it may not. But
yeah.
so usually it's a thought that comes to me from who knows where. It's a song lyric, a friend, you say something, or I have something that just, when I'm driving, a lot of folks are creative when they're driving.
Yeah.
And because you're riding and quietly in a car and you're thinking and something comes to you, that's very difficult to stop and write it
Yeah,
down. But
yeah.
I've
Pull
used
over.
I've used voice memos. I've
Yeah.
written full poems on voice memos
Yeah.
before.
Yeah,
So and I've definitely pulled over
yeah,
and written them down.
safer.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Does your love of music influence your writing?
Does. I have not with me, but I have, I would say 8 or 10 poems that are music oriented or about a band or somehow related
Mhm.
to favorite bands, favorite musicians.
Who are your favorite bands?
How much time do we really have to have that? That's a whole nother conversation. But
Briefly mention one or two.
folks who know me know my all-time favorite is an old band called Little Feat. Do you remember them? So there's plenty of others.
Yeah. Well, are these the same elements you emphasized when you wrote the sketches? Tell us about one of those sketches. What does
Actually,
a sketch mean?
well, and that wasn't even the term I used. Somebody else later described those as sketches. So in a previous career, we we would have like this annual event. It was more of a banquet, and so we decided that banquet was getting kind of boring, and so we started writing skits, for maybe is a better term, and little short skits that both made points, told fun stories, got some laughter, and it was a little more entertaining while making a point. And so so over several years, I would write those out, and some of my colleagues would sort of perform them. So
Well, where was it performed?
mostly I was a Chamber of Commerce executive
Oh,
for 30 years. And so sometimes at our annual banquets, I was involved with the project. And folks may have heard of the All America City Award, which is a national recognition. So I wrote a sketch for a performance at that event one year, actually probably 2 different years. And so, so to tell you the truth, they were business related, but they were written to not be just boring business conversations, to present whatever we needed to present, but in a sketch or a fun way, an acted out way.
So it was a formal meeting
Mm-hmm.
and you had the dinner and the speaker, and then you had the skit to kind of balance out the evening.
Somewhere in there. So it could be early or it could be late, but it was, and we used it often as a tease too. So it would be come to the event, could have been a luncheon, it could have been a dinner, but it was like, we're going to have this, we're going to do that. And after a while, people realized we would use the keyword and there will be some surprises.
Oh, okay,
And
okay.
so the surprise would be whatever the topic of the sketch was that particular time. So,
Well, I would like to
So-
hear more about the composition or the compilation of
Okay.
Exposed Roots. How did it come about? When was it published?
this was published just over a year ago. So spring, actually, I think we announced it Poetry Month, April of
Yeah.
2023. The title is Exposed Roots. It's really a collection of stuff I've written. So there wasn't a specific theme at first. It was just, these are some of the better ones I've written. After a while, it was kind of, some of these are okay. These are pretty good. And somebody else might want to read them. And so I compiled it and worked with the publisher to put it together. So been well received, and I've enjoyed the feedback. And
Did you do readings when it came out?
I did some, and I still do, and I actually do not a lot, but I do a fair number of open mics. And
Oh,
so,
okay. Yeah.
and sometimes where I live, but even if I travel, sometimes I'll literally Google and say, I wonder if there's an open mic
Yeah,
in this
yeah, yeah.
area. And so just literally this year, I did one in Montana. Last year I did a couple in Spokane, Washington, because I was there for some stuff. And
Oh, so you
so
get
I
around.
just, well, work takes me different
Yeah.
places. And then sometimes I'm going, well, they've never heard any of my poems. So if there's an open mic, if there is one
Yeah.
and it fits, I'll go and
Do you know
participate.
so-and-so books in Raleigh? They have,
Uh,
they have open mic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's more often than one thing. So I
Yeah.
just literally Google sometimes or I'll say open mic in Raleigh if that's where I happen to be
yeah,
for a week or a work project. So, and if you find one and it happens to during the window I'm there.
yeah.
So the last one was that I did traveling was in Montana back in March. I was there for 4 days and
And you found one.
found one, and it was great. It was a really, really nice place.
Yeah.
So
Are you a member of the Writers Network, North Carolina Writers Network?
I am, yes.
Well, if you ever go to their conferences, they have open mic.
And they've done a lot on at their meetings on Zoom and stuff
Yeah,
as well. So
Yeah,
but I haven't read at any of them yet.
okay.
So
Well, I am going to ask you to please read a few of your poems
Sure.
from Exposed Roots.
This is nature oriented, but it also has some other meanings that'll be
Okay,
pretty evident. And it's entitled Cast Me. Cast me into nature so my dusty ashes return to earth, where I can nourish still a final act of giving, loving. Cast me into nature where I dissolve into moist soil, joining the fluid of life to seep and flow. Mother Nature fuses me into the life cycle, water, plant, oxygen, evaporation, rain, and renourish. Cast me into nature, for I've no particular place to call home other than this good earth, where it is anywhere that I may be visited or remembered. When you see the river, whether raging torrent or trickling over smooth stones, I may be there.
Mhm.
When the breeze shares pollen, distributing the nectar of life, I may be there. When you stand upon a mountaintop and inhale deeply, I may be there. When you see rain clouds in the sky or hypnotizing rhythms of ocean waves, I may be there. When you feel mist upon your cheeks, know I am with you.
What inspired that?
I think I kind of got the line cast me. And I had a conversation with a work colleague, and we were actually talking about, I was sharing, she also writes more music, but I was sharing, sometimes you just get a thought and you have to go with it. And as we shared, and we kind of laughed about sometimes they take a long time and sometimes it's quick. And I actually walked into my office. I was outside of my own office. I walked back into my office and I had that and I literally sat down and wrote it. And I walked back out 20 minutes later and she said, "You did not just write." Yeah, well, yes, I did. So the word casting me was what was the idea came, and
Well, I had the feeling that it was your own ashes spread so that the person that was still on earth when you weren't there would know that you were. It may be me.
I think that'll be the ultimate outcome. And this may be read at the end of my life, but it was really written just because I had a
Well, maybe not
great
yours,
concept.
but whoever
yeah,
you had in
yeah.
mind, that gave me that feeling that you're there.
Yes, and to
But
me,
you're everywhere.
right, and it's I love nature, and so I've written several about nature, and that really probably started as a thought about nature, and it became more than that. So
Wow.
I love how they grow and become something different.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, I'm ready for at least two more.
oh my goodness. Let's see, I marked a few just to
Okay,
see
take your
which ones,
time.
but I think
Sure.
let's do one that's a touch longer. It's not real long, but rather than two. This is a poem about my grandmother's home. She lived in the Ouachita Mountains of northwest Arkansas. And her home property, if you will, was called Willowbrook. And so this is entitled Willowbrook. A house made of rock at the foot of a mountain where the brook flowed trickling like a fountain. Small it was, so special indeed, the fish in the brook were fun to feed. In the loft was her studio, where she'd write and paint, artistically inclined, this home so quaint. The loft was also where brother and I slept, once stung by wasps, loudly screamed and wept. We always forgot my bathing suit, swam in my underwear, might as well my birthday suit. Her old car named Miss Annie adventured us through streams and woods, riding her sideboards, danger completely ignored. I fired a shotgun. We saw spiders and snakes. Memories from Willowbrook, a forever keepsake. We hiked the mountain, roamed through the trees, sat on the rock porch, listened to the breeze. The wicker furniture, it was so nice. I'm glad I have it now to remember it by. Antique furniture dotted the rooms. Flowers she planted seemed to always have blooms. There were hundreds, crawfish galore. With grandmother gone, we could go no more. Only in our minds we remember the place. Would go there now to evade the rat race. Playing at grandmother's was always swell. Sitting on her wicker just now, Willowbrook I can almost smell. Everything about the place was special and nice. Best description, grandchild's paradise.
Now that's your love poem.
Thank
We're just about out of time, so I'm glad you picked that one because it was really beautiful.
you.
And memories, beautiful
Yeah.
memories. Yeah,
Yeah, that was a special place, and everybody in our family loved it.
yeah, you loved it too. I could
Absolutely,
tell. I
absolutely.
could tell. Well, you have been a warm and charming guest. Thank you so much for being here
Yes,
today.
ma'am. My pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to Poets on Poetry. This is Sonia Usatch-Kuhn, Rashawn Media, Peter Rashawn, producer.